Hi, my name is Caroline Long, and I'm going to be presenting on Being Brought from Africa to America and A Hymn to the Evening, both written by Phillis Wheatley. Some background on Phillis Wheatley. Phillis Wheatley was born in Senegal in 1753, and there's no information on who her parents are. At the age of 8, she was kidnapped and put on a slave trading ship and was bought by John Wheatley, who was a tailor in Boston, for his wife Susanna. So John bought her to be Susanna's servant. She was sent to Boston because of her frail frame and health were not fit for the hard labor of the South. Susanna recognized Phillis's intelligence and mentored her with her 2 children, and they encouraged her literary pursuit and taught her Greek, Latin, ancient history, and many other subjects. Her first piece was published when she was 13 in the Newport Mercury, which was a story about 2 men who almost drowned at sea. And this is one of the only pictures I could find of her. Obviously, during that time, there weren't actual pictures, just paintings. And because she was not a free woman, the likelihood of there actually being more paintings of her were slim. Some more biography on her. In 1773, Wheatley published the poems on various subjects, religious and moral. To have it published, she needed patronage and 17 prominent Boston men to validate that she was the author of this book of verse. John Hancock was included in the list, and he went on to sign the Declaration of Independence. So she was well connected because of John and Susanna Wheatley. And the reason she needed 17 white men to validate her book is because no one would trust her without the men saying that she wrote this, which is very sad. So by being the first African American and enslaved person in the U.S. to publish a book of poems, she was as well the 3rd American woman to do this. She became a trailblazer for the literary community and especially for African American women. She was freed from slavery, but sources say she was devastated by the deaths of the member of the Wheatley family, especially the parents. And she was only freed after John, the father, passed away. In 1778, Wheatley married John Peters, who was a free African American man, and they had 3 children, but all passed away as infants. And a lot of people rejected to the marriage of John Peters. I think they thought they were of different ranks. Their marriage was a struggle, and they lived in poverty, forcing Wheatley to become a maid in a boarding house. And although she continued to write, the political conditions and tensions with the British and the Revolutionary War hindered her writing, and she was not able to get a second book of poems published. Wheatley passed away in her early 30s in Boston, Massachusetts. So because it was during the Revolutionary War, not a lot of people were focused on publishing poems, and so she wasn't able to find a publisher. Some background on John and Susanna, who are the closest information I have to family for her. So Susanna and John Wheatley were married on Christmas in 1741, and they had 5 children, but only 2 lived into adulthood. They were active Congregationalists, so they were active Christians, and they taught Phillis the Bible at a young age, which then proceeded into teaching her Greek, Latin, and as well as English. So when Susanna had started teaching Phillis the Bible, Phillis showed that she was very highly intelligent, and so that is why Susanna continued teaching her. Phillis was encouraged to socialize with the political, socially, and religiously prominent guests, and so she was able to network. Susanna's family encouraged Phillis's writing, and Susanna's relative, Selina, Countess of Huntington, became Phillis's patron and helped publish her first book of verse in 1773. So Selina was one of the reasons why she was able to publish her book, and she was able to get connections in London. After Susanna Wheatley died, Phillis wrote to John Thornton, who is an English philanthropist, "By the great loss I have sustained of my best friend. I feel like one forsaken by her parent in a desolate wilderness." And although Phyllis's position in the Wheatley household is speculated, we at least know how Phyllis felt about Susanna. When writing to her friend Obor Tanner, she states that she is grateful that Susanna adopted her and treated her more like a child than her servant. And I have a lot of my own opinions on John and Susanna Wheatley and this whole complex, I guess. I find it very interesting that they were active Christians and yet they found it okay to have enslaved people. And she was only freed after John passed away. And, you know, they encouraged her to do all of these things, and yet they still kept her under their household. And so, in a way, it kind of can come across as though they were using, like, taking her achievements as their own. Politics, Wheatley strongly supported America's fight for independence from Britain. And she was also a big fan of the Continental Army's commander, George Washington. And she wrote many odes to honor Washington, which resulted in being invited to Washington's headquarters in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which she went to in March of 1776. And there were many politics around Wheatley's identity, and many people criticized the Wheatleys for continuing to enslave her, even though they claimed her as the African genius. Wheatley as well still lived in the servant quarters and was kept at an arm's length away. And so that's one of the reasons why I have so many hesitancies to speak well of John and Susanna, because they continued to enslave her, and yet they claimed her as the African genius and kind of claimed her as their own, but she was enslaved to them. And although she says that she felt like Susanna was more of a mother to her than a mistress, she still was a mistress. Obviously, I don't know Phyllis's relationship with them, but just looking from the outside in, it's a little hard to think well of them. So her first poem on being brought from Africa to America: "'Twas mercy brought me from my pagan land, taught my benighted soul to understand." And Wheatley's main theme in this poem is gratitude and Christianity. She is stating that she was taken from her land and brought to America to be able to know God, and so she is grateful for it. I don't think she is excusing the fact that she was kidnapped, and I think even the italics with pagan land is she's using not sarcasm per se, but what other people think when they think of Africa at that time, kind of throwing it back in their faces. So I don't think she thinks it's pagan. Some view of our sable race with scornful eye, their color is a diabolic dye. Remember, Christians, Negroes, black as Cain, may be refined and join the angelic train. And so she's saying that many people look down on her race. They look at her race with a scornful eye. But she's also saying that she can go to heaven, and it's not just white people that go to heaven, is my interpretation. But that everybody could be refined and join the angelic train. And A Hymn to the Evening, this was written as an ode for her love for God. The desire was to have the same glow as the evening to make her feelings towards God evident. So she's talking about how beautiful the sun sets when there's a sunset, obviously. And she is wanting to use that to make her feelings towards God evident. And it says, "The evening shows the power of God by how beautiful it is. Though all the heavens what beauteous dyes are spread, but the west glories in the deepest red, so may our breasts with every virtue glow, the living temples of our God below." And so she's urging the readers to hold on to the beauty of the evening. And if we're able to put that same glow that is in the evening in our hearts for God, we would be living temples for God. So we would be constantly worshiping God. I have a video, and I will go to Google Chrome. That's not what I want to do. Okay.
brought from Africa to America. Now, as an 8-year-old coming over, she surely remembered what it was like. And being brought by a family that cared about her education and intellectual development is the rarest thing you've ever heard of. But it let her have time to contemplate deep ideas like this and have the opportunity to write them and share them. This is not a poem, though, that you can take at face value. You must look beyond her words to see what she really means. In the first line, she says that she's glad someone took her from her homeland and taught her Christianity. That is not what she means. She does not mean she thinks her own race should be refined, like she says in the poem. Now, everyone can interpret a poem differently, but as for me, I think she's slightly mocking the people who tried to show her how slavery saved her soul, how it was good for her. The last line says that Christians and Negroes can join the angelic train. She uses the Christian idea that all people are equal who accept Jesus to counteract that racism. So, have a listen. "'Twas mercy brought me from my pagan land, taught my benighted soul to understand that there's a God, that there's a Savior too. Once I redemption neither sought nor knew. Some view our sable race with scornful eye. Their color is a diabolical dye. Remember, Christians, Negroes, black as Cain, may be refined and join the angelic train."
Okay. So she basically said everything that I already said, but there aren't a lot of analyses on these poems. So the connections that I thought of when I think of Wheatley's first poem that we analyzed, I thought of the song "I Know Where I've Been" from Hairspray, and I will not sing it for you, so you're welcome. And I know Hairspray took place during the Civil Rights Movement, but the Civil Rights Movement mirrors so many of the movements that are going on today with Black Lives Matter and how Black people are still fighting for basic human rights. And one verse from the song that stands out to me is, "There's a dream in the future, there's a struggle that we have yet to win, and there's pride in my heart because I know where I'm going, yes I do, and I know where I've been." And Wheatley never forgot her roots, and she wrote about them in her poetry. Like I mentioned earlier, Wheatley was a trailblazer and opened the door for so many other writers of color. And because of her roots, she was able to use that in defense of her identity. So discussion questions. So on being brought from Africa to America, do you think Wheatley takes pride in her roots, or do you think she looks down on where she comes from, especially because of the use of the word pagan, because that is a loaded word? And then the second question I debated on putting, but it was something that every time I looked more and more into her life, it was something that just kept popping up for me. And it's, do you think Wheatley suffered from Stockholm Syndrome, or do you think she genuinely felt as though she was part of the family? Because she was technically not part of the family. She was bought to be a servant, and she was still kept that way in many ways. She still lived in the servants' quarters and different things like that. And so I just want to know what you guys think. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. It was very interesting to read about Phillis Wheatley. I had never really heard of her before this. And to hear about her life, it's a very unique life. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you.